Ini lah, semua sendiri.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers. Thank you for attending our discussion today. It is really good honor for us. Really appreciate, because right now is Friday afternoon. You know, usually people are not interested in doing serious thing on Friday afternoon. Maybe they prefer to go to Sydney or somewhere. So really appreciate. And today we will discuss about a very important issue, which is bureaucracy in the post-authoritarian Indonesia. And we have two distinguished speakers. They are distinguished because they are not only students, but also practitioners, government officials. The first speaker is Muhammad Imam Al-Fisharin, Master of Public Policy student from Harvard School of Public Policy. He is also policy analyst at the Indonesian Ministry of Administrative and Bureaucratic Reform. And the second speaker is Ms. Elsa Robiris Monica, the same school, Master of Public Policy student at Harvard School. She is financial analyst at the Indonesian Ministry of Industry. We will have 1 hour discussion, so probably I will ask presenter to speak on about 10 minutes each, and then we will have a question and answer. Actually this paper has been presented a few months ago in a conference in Vietnam, I guess, and hopefully we can get insight about bureaucracy reform, and also the relations probably between bureaucracy and politicians, maybe. Okay, I will let the expert to talk, and I will take care of my kids. Okay.
Thank you all for coming to these presentations. Now we're going to have presentations about Indonesian bureaucracy under local and international pressures, finding better ways to reform the machinery of government. This is the presentation outline, so at first we have introductions, and then after that we're going to Indonesian globalization, and then we go narrower to Indonesia's decentralization. Then we talk about does bureaucracy matter? And then we're going to talk about bureaucratic reform from 2005 until 2015. It was under SBY government, I think. And the last is bureaucratic reform under Jokowi, our current government. Okay, as you can see from the slides, Indonesian public administration is currently facing dual pressures. On one hand, we live in the era where countries interact closer than ever. So they interact, work with one another to cooperate, to compete, to challenge, and to survive. And in this big wave of globalization, issues become borderless, and if we taken from Friedman's notions that the world becomes flat. And these conditions lead to a global and regional network of interactions between countries, especially in form of economic and social integration. Some examples of regional associations is European Union and ASEAN. Countries then forced to adapt to the pressures of regional and global integrations. On the other hand, there is a huge pressure from within as a result of decentralization started in 1999. Since then, many government functions and finance have been transferred significantly to the local governments. The underlying assumptions of decentralization is that lower level of government understands the local residents' aspirations better, and also to improve accountability and efficiency, and reducing bureaucratic layers, and also to generate innovation at the local level. This thing has encouraged the people, the citizens, to identify themselves locally, not nationally. And however, in a unitary state such as Indonesia, this became a big challenge because principally the country's sovereignty lies in the central government, not in the regions. Thus, there is a possibility that decentralization doesn't go along with national development plan. And here we would like to examine the positions of Indonesian bureaucracy within the challenge brought by these two pressures and the role it has to manage them, whether bureaucracy is a villain, victim, or saint. And we would also see whether the policies made by Jokowi's government go in line with the previous policy by SBY. Formally, the transition had gone smoothly, but we still do not know how it will go in the future. We also want to see whether the bureaucratic reform in SBY era had been succeeded and what are the bureaucratic reform approaches made by Jokowi. Okay, and as you can see that Indonesia faced external pressures. The closest external pressures faced by Indonesia is ASEAN Community. And it is now really crucial for Indonesia to equip itself with progressive improvements and to widen and deepen cooperation with other countries in order to stay competitive toward creating a world-class government. And as we can see, the challenges for Indonesia regarding the upcoming ASEAN Community is there are actually 6 challenges. First is competitiveness. Second is worker skill. Third is business and investment policies. Fourth is Indonesians' perception toward international relations. Fifth is infrastructure, and the last is bureaucracy. And 4 out of these 6 challenges, competitiveness, business and investment policies, infrastructure and bureaucracy, are closely related to the bureaucracy and institution in Indonesia. This is the ASEAN Global Competitiveness Index in 2014-2015. Indonesia's ranking increased from last year and seems competitive in the regional level. But however, if we elaborate these indicators, we will find that in the basic requirement dimensions, institutions gets the lowest score. And also in the innovation and sophistication factors, innovation scores far lower than business sophistications. Also, an analysis from the Ministry of Trade shows that Indonesia's competitiveness is still lower compared to some major Asian countries, which are Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And Indonesia's competitiveness lies mostly in the government effectiveness and also low value-added sectors such as minerals, textiles, clothes, and etc. And this comes from the problem in the machinery of government and structure of government budget. Okay, the first challenge is in the business and investment policies. Despite moving towards free market, actually many policies in Indonesia still characterized as protectionist policies. We already identified in the last 4 years, Indonesia produced at least 5 protectionist laws. First is law number 13, 2010 on horticulture. Second is law number 18, 2012 on food. Law number 19, 2013 on protection and empowerment of farmers. Law number 3, 2014 on industry, protection of domestic industry. And also law number 7, 2014 on trade. And Indonesia's doing business rank also dropped from 116 to 120. Inefficient government, bureaucracy, and corruption alleged as factors contributing to this. In this doing business 2004, Indonesia's performance can be seen in how long an investor has to wait to get their business started. It takes approximately 48 days to start a business in Indonesia. Only Cambodia and Myanmar have worse ranking in this category. The second challenge is infrastructure. Infrastructures is really an important factor for countries' economic development. However, unfortunately, Indonesia's infrastructure growth is really slow. So back in 1990 to the first half of 2000s, infrastructure development grew slowly because so many corruption happened in the system. Constructors have to pay about 30 to 50% kickbacks to the public works agency. But after 2006, corruption persists, but we got another challenge. KPK's performance in investigating and prosecuting corruption cases made bureaucrats afraid of making important decisions, including in infrastructure tendering. This made the problem even twofold, both lies in bureaucracy. The last challenge is in bureaucracy itself. So, as we can see in the Indonesian bureaucracy, there are so many red tape and rent-seeking behaviors. So, it increases cost of trading up to 60%. And also, document and preparation and cargo handling take 82% and 91% of time spent in processing export and import. And now, talking about government effectiveness, we can see from the previous explanation that all those challenges are closely related to government effectiveness. And so to get Indonesia ready for regionalism and globalization, the bureaucracy variable is something that needs to be improved as soon as possible. So, despite the good performance in the competitiveness index, its government effectiveness still poor, even compared with other countries in the ASEAN regions. In the government effectiveness index, we are number 4, below Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And then, actually, this is a little research made by Alfie. He examined some variables of government effectiveness and the GDP level. The result shows the highest R-squared lies in the government effectiveness variable, meaning that countries with high GDP tend to have a more effective government, and vice versa. But in this case, we're not talking about causality. And then after the challenge from outside Indonesia, now we're talking about Indonesia and its challenge from within. I will hand this to Alfred.
So, as we have seen from Elsa's presentation, that globalization is something inevitable, but we also face another challenge from within. It's from the trend of localism. After the Suharto fall in 1998, we are faced with strong force from the regions, from local residents to have their own power to control their own government. And it takes form on decentralization. Decentralization in here brought about 3 challenges. First is socio-political, and then administrative and economic. But I will not touch on economic issues because we have seen a lot of papers talking on this part, so I will only focus on socio-political and administrative aspects. First, the socio-political challenges of decentralization that the Indonesia faces. I guess some of you attended the Indonesia Update 2013, where Marcus Mietzner said that since the decentralization, we got this era of renaissance of local identities, where people move away from Orde Baru or the New Order's Japanization to their local cultures and identities. And now we only have one province outside Java that its governor is not Japanese. So if we compare to Suharto era, we got roughly 70% of governors outside Java are Japanese. And now people more likely to self-identicate themselves with their localities. And this creates hurdles for the integration of Indonesia itself, let alone the globalization. And the second aspect that I would like to touch here is the challenges. Since 1999, we got 209 new districts and 8 new provinces. And this creates small kings, so this creates vessels in Indonesia that the governors or the local government heads, they tend to act like they are kings in their regions and they want to follow some rules that they don't like. And in the bureaucracy itself, it creates a problem of tendency of recruiting only local born. And this is a very manifest challenge that we had. If you read newspapers or online media lately, some provinces and local governments, they haven't announced the recruitment, the result of their recruitment, because some of the problem behind was those qualified, those successful in the recruitment, in the test, were not local born. So they reject the result. This is a problem that we face currently. And there are also huge dependency for central government transfer by these local governments, respectively 72% and 82% of regencies and municipalities' budget comes from this transfer. So, back to the question, does bureaucracy matter? Our answer to date is yes, of course. And this supposedly be a controllable element for the development of Indonesia. However, the above picture shows that bureaucracy appears to be a stumbling block. But is bureaucracy a group of villains? I wouldn't say yes, but let's see. Because since 2005, I only take 2005 as a starting point, because talking post-authoritarian, we're supposed to talk from 1998, but we just like to focus on the first presidential election, that was the SB era. So it was started in Ministry of Finance in 2005, where the minister then, Sri Mulyani, initiated some routine discussion every week with her staff about how they're going to improve their agency. And then they come up with the idea of giving extra allowance for the employees, which they call at that time remuneration, something that then revised as performance allowance. But this remuneration or this performance allowance create jealousy, can I say that, to other ministries. So other ministries that want to follow this way, the pathway, and then in 2008, the government, through the Ministry of Administrative Reform, created these general guidelines for reform. That is basically the way how agencies can get their performance allowance. So it's not basically how they're going to do reform, but how to get performance allowance. So it was not until 2010 that we have this bureaucratic reform grand design and bureaucratic reform roadmap of 2010, 2055, 2010, 2040 respectively, that we have areas of change, that we have focus on what we are going to do. When I say focus, it's actually not really true, because it's, when you say 8 areas of change, within these 8 areas of change, there are many sub-areas and sub-areas that we need to change. So, but at least we have this scenario of how bureaucracy will be in the next 25 years, or 15 years. So. And within these documents as well, Indonesia also committed to do this dual approach. First is the quick wins, so we get the low-hanging fruit as soon as possible, and the long-term change. And then comes the reshuffle of the cabinet in 2011, where the minister and vice minister then would like to introduce the acceleration of bureaucratic reform through the moratorium of PNS recruitment. PNS stands for Pegawai Negeri Sipil. If you haven't known that yet. It's the ongoing civil service, the ongoing Australian public service here in Australia. And then another approach that they took was centralization of PNS recruitment, and then computer-assisted tests for recruitment of the PNS, and then open recruitment for senior executives, and downsizing of ministry structures, and the online mechanism to evaluate the bureaucratic reform progress in each agency or ministry. But how far have they gone? If we see the programmatic targets, goals and objectives of the BR itself, you can see here that the target here is to create clean government, better public service, and high-performing and accountable bureaucracy with these indicators, baseline, and targets. But I would like to focus on the very right column there, the status. If you see there, all the rows within that column shows lower score than the left-hand side of it. It means that all the indicators of bureaucratic reform program are failed to achieve their targets. So although it's not uncommon for a government program to fail, to be designed to fail, but it's very, very significant point to be said, because none of the indicators are successful. So, what has actually been done during SBA regime? I wouldn't say that SBA did nothing, because we have this in Indonesia. In 2008, there were the enactment of the Ministries Law number 39, which categorized ministries into 3 types, and then for each type, there are maximum size for the ministerial structure. In 2009, there were the Public Service Law number 25, which introduced the public service standard. So previously in the Law number 32, 2004, the local government law, we only know the public service minimum standard that each local government has to comply with due to their transfer of authority. But now in the Public Service Law number 25, each and every public service delivery unit has to have public service standard. So it's like in the UK in 1992, when John Major was the Prime Minister, they introduced what they call the Citizen Charter. So it's kind of that approach. And then Public Service Law also introduced the financial redress, but until now, we haven't seen the government regulation about that. So the basic idea is when you were, you will get compensation for bad public service. That's the idea, but we haven't got the regulation out yet. The next one is the Civil Service Law number 5, 2014, which emphasized the integrated system of the personnel, public personnel administration. So in this law, we don't recognize anymore the local government employees and central government employees. We only recognize one ISN, one PNS system. And then the Civil Service Commission established under this law, their duties are to monitor and evaluate the process of management of the civil servants. And also the open recruitment of SES, which previously only initiated by the Ministry of Administrative Reform, now comes into law, provisions under this Undang-Undang ASN. And then this law also introduced determination upon poor performance of the civil servants. So if previously, no matter how bad you perform in the bureaucracy, you will not get fired, in this law, it becomes possible. And then the new law comes also the Administrative Law number 30, which separates the administrative misconduct with public law violation. And then it also explicates how every government official can use their rights to discretion, and also about redress if you make loss of public finance due to administrative misconduct, you have to pay back to the government, but we still haven't got the regulation out yet. Then came Jokowi. Well, for many Indonesians, Jokowi government in relation with bureaucratic reform, so far we only heard about this, how government administration, how government offices have to have set up their air conditioning to 25 degrees Celsius, or roughly at a minimum it's only 24, so you cannot go below that. So it's in the Menpan Circular number 10, 2014, and with this traditional snacks for meetings, so they boiled cassava or steamed cassava and corn, things like that. And then also prohibition of holding meetings outside office through the circular number 11, and now under Menpan's decree number 6, 2015. So limitation limits on how government officials can hold meetings. And the last one is the limitation on the number of people that you can invite in your personal occasion, so including wedding. Well, I don't know, is it your invitation, Elsa? But you have to be, you have to consider this as part of the regulations under Jokowi rule now. But I wouldn't say that that was only what Jokowi doing now. Well, we also have this in the near future. We are still waiting for the bureaucratic reform roadmap 2015-2019, the second term. And then Indonesia also still working on the regulation on PNS management. Particularly this part, I would like to emphasize on that new grading pay scale. So we would not recognize anymore the golongan 3A, 3B, and so on. So we have the new grading system, a new pay scale, which we can discuss later. And then the next one is government regulation on PPPK. PPPK is similar to non-ongoing APS here in Australia. So set up the entry level and position that they can assume in the bureaucracy and how the contract will be arranged. And the last one will be the government regulation on pay and pension. Some of you, I believe, have heard about the change on the payment system, or not payment, financing system of the pension of the civil servants starting 2017 in projection. Then we will change the system from pay-as-you-go to fully funded one. And then we will still also have options, whether we're going to give severance or just monthly pensions, just like regular one here. And to conclude this, if the question like Mas Awid proposed at the beginning, whether bureaucracy is villain, victim or hero, it's a wicked question. It could be both, it could be each of them, it could be all of them, depending on how political leaders built relations with bureaucracy. And so far, Jokowi's administration, as we all know, tried to be antithesis of SBA. So when SBA started with the grand design and so on, Jokowi's administration, especially Yudhishthira Nandi, the new Minister of Administrative Reform, tried to go more pragmatic, try to come to each and every agency he can to persuade them to do the bureaucratic reform. However, this approach wouldn't last long systematically because we also have this problem of myopia. So Jokowi has to avoid this problem and try to create a more rigorous reform in the future. So that's all, and we are here open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfie and Elsa. Without further ado, I'm going to invite any questions from audiences. Effie and then Yogi. Effie, please.
Oh, thanks. It was a very nice presentation. Well, I mean, I'm part of bureaucrats. Well, not really. Well, we can say that anyway. With the remuneration and everything, like the spending on PNS is like double or triple. How has it been assessed? Has it been successful in sort of making the performance better? Like, has there been any assessment at all about that? And secondly, I wonder why this Yudi Krishnandi is so interested into the nitty-gritty and oh my god. Okay, I just cannot imagine what is in his mind. He's never been a bureaucrat. Right, fine. But then, I don't know what's on his mind, and maybe you can give me an idea of why he's more concerned about this, nitty-gritty issue rather than like the bigger picture of the bureaucratic reform. Is his idea of bureaucratic reform is that very narrow? Yeah, thanks.
Yogi, director.
Yeah. Thank you. Congratulations for Mas Alvi and Elsa who present really interesting topics. And I'm sorry I'm coming late, so maybe there was some information that I skipped. But I just wondering that right now the discourse on the post-authoritarian bureaucracy assume that bureaucracy right now it's more fragmented than before. So I just curious with your paper is how you both see about this academia discourse that assume that in the post-authoritarian bureaucracy, the bureaucracy system is more fragmented, and right now also about from the decentralization, the center or central bureaucracy can have different policy with the local bureaucracy, and yeah, how you both see about this situation. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Effie, for the question. So I can straightly answer your first question with no. We haven't had a rigorous evaluation on whether or not the performance allowance improved the performance of the government officials. But since 2011, late 2011, we have this system called PMPRB. PMPRB is self-assessment of the progress of bureaucratic reform in each agency or ministry, which evaluate the overall performance of the bureaucracy in each of the 8 areas of change in the ministry. But yes, as I said, if your question is whether or not we have the evaluation on the effect of the performance allowance, we don't have it yet.
So the regulation was put in place without any an assessment platform. So it was just because they want to raise the PNS salary and then that's it. Okay, no more performance assessment.
Yeah, the logic behind that was not only about the performance itself, but to make it more systematic. I mean, like previously, before the performance allowance, every PNS can get extra allowance from this and that team that actually part of their function, part of their role and responsibility in their job, in their position. With this performance allowance, that is being taken very clear, so that if you're doing your duties and responsibility, you will not get extra money, but if you do it good, you will get this allowance. So that's the one of the ideas behind this performance allowance.
So my assumption was wrong in the way that the expenses on PNS is not doubled or tripled, but it's actually the same.
And actually, in some ministries, you can see that it's getting low. It's decreasing now. Yeah, so like especially for the ministries or agencies that has what we call PNBP, they previously got very high take-home pay, but now after this performance allowance, it's getting far reduced, far reduced. That's why in some ministries they see bureaucratic reform as something demotivating. And that's something we are also in a way evaluating it.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks.
And your second question. Oh yeah, it's hard to comment on this.
No, I mean, has there anyone like told him, like his team maybe? You know,
Sure.
He's getting like short-sighted.
Sure. As I said, as we observed in our paper here, that we thought that UD and Jokowi in general try to make different approach than SBY. Like if you see, probably they see that okay, the bureaucratic reform under SBY couldn't meet the targets. Now we have to try another approach to this thing, to this, and then UD try to, okay, I will come to each and every agency I can, if not agency, it's just unit I can, to see what's the problem in that agency, and then come back to his office with ideas of what we can do or what we can improve from that situation. But yes, you are correct when saying that there is a bigger picture that probably UD didn't see or don't see yet. But yeah, our observation is that like he's trying to make a new approach from the previous administration.
So we can conclude that he is coming with this new approach, but unfortunately with sunnies, a pair of sunnies, so that everything like one level darker. Fairness is now demonized. Thanks, everybody.
Yogi, thank you for your question. I didn't hear it all, but your first question was that the decentralization create this fragmented government.
What?
Yes. You probably can find it in Firman. You know, Tommy Firman once said that this fragmented government after decentralization hinders the process of development, economic development in regions, because they are more reluctant in cooperating with other regions, even they're adjacent to them. It's a problem, of course, for the development. In some cases, we all see in the online recently that some local governments don't want to cooperate with another local government just because they see that, no, I want the money come from you. So it's just about the war on resources. So that's one problem. And the second problem, the fragmented government, you can see in my experience, is the mobility of civil service. So we have said that in 2011 or 12, there was the moratorium of the recruitment of civil service. Actually, during that 1 year of moratorium, government agencies, especially local governments, have to assess the need of civil service in their district, and then the result would be combined nationally to see which local government or provinces has excess public civil service. So these local governments that has excess civil service can transfer the civil servants to other local governments that has low number or lack of number in civil service. But during that year, the whole year, no single civil servants moved from one district to another. No single civil servant moved as a result of that. No. Because of what? Because local governments reluctant to have their civil servants transferred to other local governments. This is part of the fragmentation of government after the decentralization, I can say. And so that was the idea behind why the Undang-Undang ASN then emphasized on one PNS, or integrated personal system, that we no longer recognize central government employees, local government employees. We only have one ISN, Indonesian civil service. So that's all probably I can say. If that meets your...
Yeah, Mas Alfi, thank you. So it's more interesting if we discuss further because you mentioned about this. So I assume that right now the bureaucratic reform still categorize that bureaucracy as the part of the representative of the state is have a distance with the society. So it's a different entity because in many academia discourse they always said that state-society relation. There's no state in society. So I just wonder why the ISN categorized civil service become one entity. So is it neglected, or is it don't pay attention toward this discourse that state cannot separate with this society context? So right now, because right now if we discuss about the bureaucratic reform or democratic reform in Indo, they always said that state-society relationship. There's no discourse that mention about how about the state in society. So if we discuss further, how about how the because you come from the public sector reform and how the public sector reform see or recognize this situation.
Thank you. I got two things to say on this. First is that theoretically, there are three schools of thoughts in how we are going to improve the government or the machinery of government. First comes from the idea of managerialism, comes from the business. Second comes from the new rights, from the economic perspectives. And the third comes from democracy, ideas of democracy. So the second school of thought, the new rights, focuses on how government should become more and more efficient through reducing its size. So more layoff, transfer of ownership from government to the private, and so on. The third school of thought is what you say as how to endear government to the society. While the first school of thought, the managerialism, is how to make government runs like a business, not transfer it to business, but how to make government runs like a business. So these three school of thoughts are the main modes of improvement of the government bureaucracy everywhere in the world. You can combine them, of course. But as far as I see, the Indonesian approach of bureaucratic reform are more likely coming from this first school of thought, that is the managerialism. So we tend to see that bureaucrats are not villain. They just harshly say fool people. They need to be taught to become smart. They just don't know what they do, so we have to get them know what they have to do. So that's the idea behind the managerialism approach. But I agree with you that we forgot this. We have to touch also on the area of democracy because it becomes widely known and widely become more and more popular. The idea of this democracy, how government have to meet the interests, meet the needs of the people they serve, of the people where they belong to. But if you see, this is where I go to the second point. If you see in the civil service law now, every PNS has to have 3 types of competencies. The first one is the technical competence. Second one is managerial competence, and the third one is socio-cultural competence. So, even if you are a, for instance, even if you are an employee of a central government agency, and then you are being transferred to a local government, you have to understand the idea of the culture around you in your society, in your new environment. So that's why we put this in the civil service law. So that's all I can say. But I agree with you that we need to touch more on the state-society relations in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions? But probably because of the time, so only 3. And from Mas Dadan, Mas sama Mas Anwar. Sadar, yeah. Okay. Sadar.
Yes, thank you for insightful presentation. Maybe a quick comment about. I've seen that not only since 2005, but since the reformation started in Indonesia, there is no substantial efforts in bureaucratic reform. Even though you have said and explained some of the law in the area of democratic reform, but I think that it haven't touched the substantial issue. I'm wondering, in the Ministry of the Bureaucracy Reform, maybe you can share with us, is there any grand design of your ministries of like how long this transformation will take place, and then what is your main target? For example, the remuneration. So maybe assume like, okay, if we triple the PNS salary, so the reform is completed. Is that the target? And then because I've seen that in our culture, when somebody new comes and then the policy change, like when you becomes policy change to Singkong and Jagu. So I mean that is there any like grand strategy from the ministries saying that in 10 or 15 years we must pursue this target? So any minister, any governmental changes will not change that strategic target. And then is there any like basics research from the ministries concerning the benchmark, the first, such as when you said about the moratorium of the PNS in the end of the SBY era. So you said that it's the PNS in the province should like assess themselves. Is there any gap between the needs and the existing? But whether you have a grand research about how your ministries measure the Indonesian PNS as a whole, as a system. So maybe like if you have already have that benchmark, and then the grand strategy is maybe a lot easier. So I'm just wondering, does your ministry have that kind of research, basic research? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My first question is related to the question. The new Undang-Undang ASN sounds too ambitious. So, is there already a blueprint how to implement this law? For example, there there will be only one type of pen at work, no more central pens, no more local pens. So it must deal with the budget system. So how will it deal with the budget accountability? And second question is regarding your scatter plot between government effectiveness and the GDP. If you don't say about the causality, how can you say if higher GDP is followed by the higher government effectiveness? Maybe it works the other way. So the government effectiveness is a driver for the GDP, or maybe the GDP per capita would be more appropriate variable for the one. I don't know. Thank you.
The last question.
Just following up some of the questions. First about the Ministry of Bureaucratic Reform. I think there's a clear line between making policy and someone who don't know what he's doing, and I guess he's the second one. He doesn't make policy, he makes some actions, which is nonsense. Nobody following his order, everybody still do what they think is best for their organizations. The second is about the salary, the performance payment for civil servants in Indonesia. And what do you think about disparity of the salary? I work for local government. I love for local government. Some advantages. I have some drawback from the acquiring salary scheme, and public servants in central government get so much money. On the other hand, some local governments that lack of resources will suffer, But I read that you work for the ministry, so I guess you have some insights on this issue. And the last question is about recruitment of civil servants and transfer promotions. About that, if you follow I followed the last recruitment in South Sulawesi about misconduct or whatever when they invited several people to get recruited. It's not an open recruitment though. So what's the point of having open recruitment when I am, the head of the district or the head of the municipalities? I can install anybody I want to a certain position. No, make no sense at all.
Okay, 3 questions.
Just a quick question, please. Do you think that working for government is a profession, or just a dedication one gives to his country? That's all.
Okay, so 3 to totally 6 questions. Please try to answer shortly. Because, that's right.
From the little research that we made. Actually, it's R square, and I think R square in the statistical, we know that R square is not related to causality or something. It's only related to the how well, right? The model fitted the regression line. So from the result, it is we can see that. The government effectiveness R squared is the highest than other factors such as infrastructure and whatsoever. So we say that government effective countries with higher GDP tend to have a higher score in government effectiveness and vice versa, but it's not casual. I mean, like, it's only R squared, and how do you do it?
Yeah, and whether or not you change the position, you will result roughly the same on the R squared. We don't talk about causality here, so it's just the relationship, I mean, like the correlation between them and the determination coefficient, the R squared one. So that's, yeah, you're right when saying that it could be the other way around. It could be government effectiveness determining the GDP level and so on. But we didn't control anything. That's one impossible to say a causality from that. We need to control many variables from that to say anything about the relationship, a causal relationship between them. So it's just correlations. And regarding Mas Alvan's second question about Undang-Undang ASN, is it too ambitious? What about the budget system? So far, or at least I can say to date, for the payment of salaries and other things, we still put it under local government budget. So even if I say that we only have one ASN system, it doesn't mean that the budget is also only comes from a single provider, that is the central government. No, it's to date the idea is still it will be paid by each local government through the transfer from central government, the dana alokasi umum, still from that post. And I have to give quick answers for so many questions. From Mas Dadan, do we have targets for bureaucratic reform in Indonesia? Yes, I have shown that. We have those indicators, although I have to say that they are too ambitious. That's why an uncontrollable indicator, so we cannot. It's too far. I mean, like, when you do bureaucratic reform, you can't automatically get a better score in the say corruption perception index, because corruption perception index also measure the politicians. Is there any corruption in the legislatives? So it's apart from the bureaucratic reform. So it's uncontrollable indicators that we use there. So yeah, I guess the new government needs to set up new targets for that. And your second question is about the continuity. Well, if we go back to the literature, Christopher Pollitt says that you need change, but you also need continuity in that change. You cannot rely on one big idea that a regime offer, because you need to consider that this regime will end one day, and the new regime will bring out new ideas. So we need to link the ideas from the previous administration with the new one, and that was basically why the previous administration, the previous minister, it was under, I believe it was still under Mangindaan that time, put the link of bureaucratic reform under the National Development Plan, the RPJMN and the RPJPN, the Long-Term National Development Plan and the Mid-Term National Development Plan. In that way, because RPJPN is provisions under law, so it will be hard to change it. So if you have this program, stick to the bigger program that has law as the basis. It will be harder for people, I mean, like the new administration, to change it drastically. So that's why the previous government linked that with RPJM and RPJP. Your third question was, is there any benchmark on how many is the ideal number of PNS? It will be difficult, if not impossible, to count say measure or to predict or to project how many PNS we have to have in Indonesia. First is because we have this unified system. With this unified system, while the functions, while the tasks are there in the local government, it will be hard for the central government to measure how many is the real number you need for doing or delivering the service. It will be very hard with this unified system. And secondly, do we really need PNS to do all those things in government? So that's why the Undang-Undang ASN then introduced this non-ongoing civil service, or what we call PPPK. So the basic idea for PPPK is, if this is, if this job can be done not by PNS, then we can just recruit PPPK for that. So in that way, we don't need to give them many rights that PNS have. We also can be more efficient on budget. And what else? Oh, Mas Anwar Sadat, you asked about your comment on UD that he didn't create any policy, just actions. Yeah, you're probably right on that, but or I can say not yet, or let's just wait or give him a chance. I don't know for how long, but yeah, as I said, we are still working on the. I cannot say we. I'm not as a manpower. I'm an academician here. Okay, Menpan is currently drafting the government regulation of the management of PNS. And last Friday was the harmonization up to article, I believe, 180 something. So there are still another 100 articles to go to make it final. So you can expect that in 1 month to be finalized. So probably in 1 month, UD will produce something, some policy.
Sebelum diganti.
Okay. So the second question here about disparity of salary or remuneration between central government and local government. I have an anecdote, actually, not anecdote. It's a real story. When Azwar Abu Bakar, the previous minister, went to one region, or I say Riau, he said about this performance allowance with very much pride on him. So he said that if you get this performance allowance, then every month you will get 50 million. You can get that 50 million. Wow, why? Is it too much? No, it's too low. Because they got that much. Well, the central government agencies, particularly the smaller ministries or agencies like Kemenpan, for instance, got very low salary as well, I can say. But I know that this, local governments have this big disparity. So instead of comparing central government to local government, between local governments themselves, very, very, very high gap between them. So that was because previously in the Ministry of Home Affairs in 2005 or 6, I forgot, decree number 3, that was the first time when the local governments can give this allowance. And the consideration is only based on whether or not the local budget is undermined because of that. And you can make all kind of justification to say that we do not undermine the local budget by giving high salary or high allowance for our employees. So basically that's why some local governments give very crazy high salary or allowances. So that's my comment on that. And regarding the open recruitment, after this government regulation out, probably next month, if you produce something out of that, we can expect that every senior executive is recruited through open promotion system. So for local government, in your case, for local government, every echelon 2 or the head of agency, local agencies, or including the secretary of a district, will be recruited openly between or within their districts, or sorry, within provinces. So you can do that.
No, we can recruit anywhere from any.
Sure. Minimum. At the minimum, you have to recruit within provinces.